doesn't care about you. That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
Underestimated Chinese power in the world. Those trains are fabulous. We rode those trains. You know, you can go from Beijing to Shanghai in 4.5 hours. And that's, 1,000 kilometers. We have Amtrak's just not like that. If you read a sellout from Boston to New York. But the level of infrastructure, here's the strengths. The infrastructure, that's one strength. Second, their scientific and technological capacity. That's the coin of the realm in our decade, in the next few decades. Which society will turn out more scientists and engineers? Here's a data point. 34% of first-year students in Chinese universities study engineering or a STEM field. The United States of America, 5.6%. And they're a much bigger country. Harvard graduation, where I teach, when we ask our graduate students to stand up as a class, chemistry majors, biology majors, physics majors, largely Asian Americans. Some American citizens, Asians, American citizens of Asian ethnicity or Chinese. Last week, when President Trump gathered all the tech titans of the United States in the White House, tremendous number of those tech titans are Indian Americans and Chinese Americans. We're not competing when it really matters for the future, and that's on technology. So, and I think the PLA, some people have said, well, it hasn't fought since 1978. What it's worth? I've seen the PLA. I think we've underestimated their military strength, their technology strength, and one other thing. The Communist Party of China is strategic, and they don't have to worry about, we want to worry about what the press says. I mean, that's a good thing to have the press challenging the government. They have nobody opposing them. And so they can make big bets over 10, 20, 30 years. Mary and I were mentioning one of them. For 35 consecutive years, the Chinese foreign minister, whoever that person is, has made his first trip of the year in January to Africa to show the Africans, you are our priority. I think President Trump never went to Africa in his first term. President Biden went once to Angola for 2 or 3 days in December, just before he resigned. They're strategic, and we're not competing on that level. So I think the Chinese in technology, military, economics are stronger than we think they are. And I think we've underestimated them, and we can't do that any longer.
So artificial intelligence is still in many cases very dumb. And I think that you asked, is it good or is it bad or is it going to help us or is it going to hurt us? The answer is probably both. And we should be trying to maximize as much of the good and minimize as much of the bad. Let me give you a very concrete example. So two artificial intelligence headlines that I've read in just the last week is one, researchers used AI to identify a new cancer drug pathway that nobody had ever come up with, and they're actually starting to see some evidence that that could be a credible and a promising way to treat certain types of cancer. So that's great. That's what we want artificial intelligence to do, is to unlock new therapeutics so that people can live longer, healthier lives. At the same time, I saw an announcement, I think it was from Sam Altman of OpenAI, who said that basically they're going to start using AI to introduce erotica and porn and things like that. And if AI is helping us find new cures for new diseases, that's great. If it's helping us come up with increasingly weird porn, that's bad. For all of our work, and we're going to keep on working at it, the Russians and the Ukrainians are just not at the point where they can make a deal. I do think that we will eventually get there. A fundamental misalignment of expectations. I'd say this in the Russia-Ukraine war, where the Russians tend to think that they're doing better on the battlefield than they actually are. And I think that's made it harder to strike a deal in these last couple of months, even though, again, we've made progress. I do think we're going to get to a deal, but
bu kadar toprak alması oradan onlar için de bir problem değil mi?
Güney Kıbrıs kendini şimdi daha güçlü hissediyor. Çünkü İsrail'in orada silahlanması vardır. Bir takım farklı silah, işte savunma mekanizması olsun, atak, saldırı olsun. Her türlü silah getirdi oraya. Yahudi İsrail Gazze'ye yönelik burada lojistik üs aldı ki önemlidir. Çünkü çok yakın, 100 kilometre bile değil. Böyle bir yerde lojistik üs önemlidir. Onu aldığını düşünüyorum. Rum'da bu İsrail'in buradaki lojistik üssünün silahlarını Kuzey Kıbrıs'a ve Türkiye'ye yönelik kullanabilirim inancı içerisindedir. Öyle bir aralarında ilişki biçimi var. Ben öyle okuyorum. Dolayısıyla İsrail hata yapıyor. Yani İsrail'den gelen yorumlar işte bir sonraki hareket Kuzey Kıbrıs olması gerekmektedir. Kuzey Kıbrıs Hizbullah'ı işte Hamas'ı İran'ı bunun içerisinde daha fazla barındırmaktadır şeklinde tamamıyla yalan dolana bağlı spekülasyonlar yapılmaktadır. Bizim bu arada muhaciretimiz var.
Gündeminiz var mısın?
Bizim muhaciretimiz var, polisimiz var. Türk Silahlı Kuvvetleri burada. Bizim bu olaylarla hiçbir alakamız yoktur. Burası temiz bir cumhuriyettir. Burada önemli olan barış, huzur ve güvenliğin devam ettirilmesidir. Ve böylesine bir yapı asla yoktur ama bunu geçenlerde de duydum, önceleri de duydum. Sık sık Güney Kıbrıs bunu gündeme getirmek zorunda.
Çalışıyor mu bu propaganda peki mesela içeride de falan böyle önünüze gelen bir şey mi?
Kıbrıs'ı Türkler'de yok ama Güney Kıbrıs'ta sürekli olarak bunun propagandası yapılıyor.
Welcome to the SCIF. Welcome to the Golden Age. I hope you got a good weekend planned. I'm on the road meeting sources. I'm currently at an undisclosed location. We'll leave it at that. And a lot of good reporting coming your way. I'm telling you, we got some huge projects at CDM that we're going to bring you insight and information that nobody else is bringing you. That's just a fact. And it's going to start with Beirut here in about 10 days. And you're going to get some really, really interesting reporting on what's going on the attacks on Christianity and how that's looking to be thwarted nationally and even globally, on how we're going to push back against the attacks on Christianity. Want to say hello to the crew. Thanks for coming in on the chat. Love it. Love the engagement. It's getting started way before the show even starts now. So that is fantastic. We really love that. Keep it going, please. Follow us on cdm.press. Check us 3 times a day. We're putting up just amazing insight and stories. We can't cover everything. But we'll cover stuff that you need to know and that you're not going to get anywhere else. And that's what the beauty and the credibility and the secret sauce of CDM is, how we do that and how we bring that information from reporters all over the world. For instance, last night, getting information on what's going on in Russia, what's going on in Siberia, what's going on with Alaska. We're going to talk about that. There's a reason Trump was in Alaska. And, God is great. He works in mysterious ways. I spent 3 years in Alaska flying combat rescue helicopters, search and rescue all over the state, long-range air refuelable aircraft. And so I have a lot of time in Alaska, on the western coast, on the North Slope, and all around. So I can really talk intelligently about that. And I got a graduate degree in engineering in Alaska. So now this is the golden age. The golden age is maybe not what you think it's going to be. So buckle your seatbelts. We're gonna tell you what it's going to be, and we're going to show you over the next few months, weeks and months, and we're looking forward to that. Got a great show today, talking about the golden age. Tom Teague on financial markets. If you're in the markets, you need to listen today. We've got Tom Teague coming on in a few minutes in the second segment to talk about and give us insight that only he can bring and only CDM can bring, to be blunt. And we've got Ira Berchatsky later to talk about what's going on in the metals markets. Wow, just explosions in the silver and gold markets. We hope you listened to us over the last 2 years about the precious metals markets, because if you put some of that in your IRA, your portfolio is looking pretty good, and we're just getting started. So we're going to talk about with Ira about that. Please check out whatfinger.com. Great aggregator site. Go there, spend some time there. We love it, and they post a lot of our content. Thank you for that. I want to not correct, but just maybe adjust the narrative that J.D. Vance was putting out about the Ukraine war. Russia is not all powerful. They have weaknesses we can exploit. We saw that with the drone attacks on their strategic aircraft. But he said something like, Russia is not as strong as they think they are. I would adjust that to Russia is not as strong on the battlefield in Ukraine as the American government, NATO, EU would like them to be. They're not as weak as they'd like them to be, put it that way. There's narrative is Russia's weak. They have gas lines. That's all false. We've been talking to people in Russia. There's no gas lines. This is a narrative put out to continue the war, and we want it to stop, and it ties into what's going on in the Golden Age. Also, Turkey, we're going to be talking about Turkey a lot. Turkey is moving into Syria with military force. Israel's not going to like this. This is the next possible conflict in the Middle East. Turkey is showing its power, if you will, and is moving into that region. Gaza, a lot of people don't want that war to stop on both sides. That is happening. And I want to talk about Venezuela because the drug war is not the drug war. What you see is not a drug war. It's a war against the regime of Maduro, who's working for the Chinese Communist Party to destroy this country via stolen elections, unrestricted warfare with gang warfare, Trinidad, some drugs, yes, but human trafficking and all of the above. That is why Trump is going after Venezuela. And it's if you notice this morning, we'll talk about it here in a minute, that Smartmatic was indicted by a grand jury in Atlanta. This is the origin of the Dominion voting machines, ES&S, and all the others. They have follow-on versions, but these machines were developed in Venezuela with a company called Smartmatic, and they've been stealing elections all around the world. Today is October 17th. I'm your host, Todd Wood. Here's your mission brief. A new Northern Alliance, it's not what you think, will delve into the new Golden Age. Tina Peters update. We'll talk about what's going on with her in the hearing yesterday. Ash Epp from our Colorado Free Press paper has been all over that. Insurrection, anyone? No King's Day is coming. Smartmatic indicted, we discussed, and a new CDC advisory committee to look at vaccines safety. RFK has pulled out all the big pharma shills in the advisory committee and put in people who are going to actually take care of human health. Isn't that interesting? So we'll be right back with Tom Teague. Got a beautiful show for you today as the weekend approaches. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And thank you for joining us on this SCIF. We really appreciate it. Be right back.
Can I ask a question about the nicotine pouches?
Yes.
Does it melt in your mouth or do you have to spit it out later?
You can spit it out, you can swallow it, or you just savor it. I mean, you throw it in like you would a dip of tobacco.
Okay.
But you just let it sit there, and then it suffuses your nervous system with life-giving nicotine. And it really does feel like the hand of God is massaging you.
But does it feel like the high of smoking a cigarette?
It's simultaneously, if you can imagine the Zen paradox, higher alertness accompanied by deep relaxation.
Wow.
So you really are, it's a Zen experience. You're like cat-like in your readiness, but you're fully
And how long does it last?
I always have one going. Sometimes if things are, if I need it, I'll put another one in. So I've got 18 milligrams of nicotine, but that gives me an unfair advantage.
You're banging 18 milligrams? Woo. That's impressive.
I don't like to because everybody else kind of recedes into the background and I become this kind of colossus when I do that, and I feel guilty about it. Hubris is inevitable at that point. So I usually keep it to one.
I mean, I could use a new addiction.
Oh, yes.
What's the gateway drug level? What would you prescribe?
This sits between caffeine
We
and
sell a
cocaine.
3 milligram, but there's a transition like all great addictions. Like it's not instant. You do vomit at first, but then your body acclimates.
Wait is finally over. My towels are back in stock, but not for long. Get a 6-piece My Towel set, regular $69.98, now only $39.98. Towels that actually work. What a concept. And that's not all. Check out our My Pillow bed sheets, only $29.88. Any color, any style, any size, even kings. Regular $119.98, now only $29.88. And how about our limited edition premium My Pillows, made with Giza cotton and a designer gusset, made exclusively for you to thank you for all your support. Queens $17.98, Kings only $19.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get My Towels for $39.98, My Pillow bed sheets only $29.88, and our limited edition My Pillow Queens $17.98 and Kings only $19.98. Quantities won't last long, so order now.
Welcome back to the SCIF. Got a few comments I just want to address. This one, look, we can talk about what's going on in the world without, slamming Jesus. I mean, that's an absurd comment. We've done more to protect Christianity than anyone I know of or any show I know of from all over the world. So that's an absurd comment. This one, I think this is Jovan, but he's talking about the ballots are the main issue, and it has nothing to do with the machines. The machines are bad, but it's about the ballots. I'm talking about Smartmatic being in control of the election software that stole our elections. That's a big, huge part of it. It's not just all the ballots. It's not just all the machines. It's all of the above. And yes, the mail-in ballots are huge. We've done more to report on that in Miami, in Florida, and across the country than anyone. So we're not discounting all those other. Just because we talk about the machines being used to steal elections doesn't mean we're not talking about the other issues. So give us a break there. Tom Teague's coming in. I'm seeing him attempt to come in the green room. I'll give him a minute there. Let's talk about a story. This one is the main one that I want to bring to your attention. What Trump and Putin have up their sleeves after the war ends, the new Northern Alliance, the Golden Age, and the Hungarian summit. Here's what's going on, folks. There's a movement to develop a Northern Economic Alliance between Russia and the United States. And this has been going on in a long time. Trump and Putin are going to meet in Budapest, hopefully move forward on ending the war, which we've been all over. And then comes the Golden Age, meaning, and this is Kirill Dmitriev, which we've talked about a lot, the Boring Company possibly going under the Bering Straits for a tunnel between Russia and Alaska. I've written books on this. I've flown all over the area. I did my master's thesis on transportation options in Alaska and how to bring people together. So I know this very well. We're going to be reporting on this, but these are old images of the New York Times and other papers talking about this decades ago. I think this is one reason for the Ukraine war. They don't want this economic engine to turn on, because think about it. Siberia and Alaska and Northern America connected economically, so much minerals, so much oil, so much natural resources, so much space. You're talking cities, you're talking infrastructure. It's unlimited what could happen up there, and we're going to be all over it going forward. So stand by. That's going to be one of our big focuses. I'm going to pull that down, and I'm going to bring in Tom Teague. Tom, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. We're in similar locales right now. I'm in an undisclosed location. So so what's going on in the markets, man? I mean, metals are exploding. I mean, what's happening, my friend?
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting. I think these are all symptoms of the waning of globalization and this kind of central planning nonsense that we've had going on in our governments, for years. This idea that the state was going to tell us what to do, and I think Bitcoin was an iteration of this. I think that gold now is behaving like that, and you've got people buying it globally. So people are standing in line in Hong Kong, people are standing in line in Brazil. They're running out of gold in Japan. I have a friend who lives in Switzerland who is buying silver and gold there. So I think it's just, people are having this view that, owning these fiat currencies with governments that are on reckless spending patterns is a bad idea. And ultimately, Like, I don't know if you recall, but in 1933, FDR made it illegal to own bullion. And you could get like a $10,000 fine.
Yeah, I remember.
And 10 years in prison. And clearly
and FDR
people
was a communist trying to instill the
correct
the whole system we're fighting now.
That was like central planning 101. So
yeah,
I think that all of this is just evidence that people don't necessarily believe in the government and that the government's going to resolve all problems. And I think, I don't think that's an anti-Trump statement. I think it's happening everywhere. And I think Trump is sort of welcoming this. And they want to get the government out of business, to some degree. You can argue that these stakes that the government's taking are the opposite of that, but I would disagree strongly with that. I think that there's some industries that, for national security purposes, it makes sense for the government to get involved in and to support, because China does that, and that's the reason they control all the rare earths, because they were doing it for no margin to build up market share and ultimately squeeze everyone out. But I think that, there's a huge deregulation thing going on in our country, which is going to unleash massive economic potential. And I think that, what we're seeing with metals and stuff now isn't necessarily like some commentary on Trump, but it's more, I'm sick of the government spending ridiculous amounts of money on stuff, and I'm not going to keep my money in US dollar cash.
Well, there's a whole, and this is a big debate, and I pinged Rob Cunningham the other day about this, because there was an article that came out by some like technocrat analyst, I forget his name, he's pretty well known, that this whole control system they're trying to build is really bad for us with Palantir and the stable coins and all that. I think that's a debate that is not answered yet. Is it going to be good or is it going to be bad? There's both sides.
I think you could make an argument easily that that there's some unhealthy aspects to Palantir eavesdropping on everyone, and to what extent do they impact your life? And you start getting into like science fiction, like do they start slowing my computer down because they don't like what I have to say online? Do my stock quotes come in a little bit slower? Do they see what my portfolio has on it? Do they see what the majority of Trump supporters' portfolios have on it? And can they, attack that, through, trading operations, that the CIA has? And, and I don't know if there was a guy who was on Joe Rogan, who was an ex-CIA guy, but he was just talking about what extent Brennan went to get him. And that no longer is it paranoid to make an assumption that the CIA might try to ruin your life. I mean,
capital is a huge issue. I mean, it's been an issue with us. I mean, we got attacked heavily.
Yep.
And here you have, Barry Weiss getting $120 million, nothing. And then, we built a real company that's global, and it's still hard to bring in capital. It's amazing because there's that
was bribery money. I mean,
for sure. Yeah.
You say what we want you to say.
Exactly. Yeah. It's I'm just saying that the capital availability is an issue for conservatives, and that needs to be solved. And, Elon can solve it if he wanted to. I still am not sure what side Elon's on so far. The consequences of what he's doing is great. So that's the way I look at it.
Well, I think and I've said this before, but I think that you definitely want many AI live language models, because it keeps everybody a bit honest. If one's like spitting out lies, the others will catch it, and people will gravitate to whoever's telling the truth. And it's, a lot of our social media has been, and I guess people don't really understand that, but when you look at TikTok and you look at Meta and you look at Instagram and, all this stuff, it's kind of all controlled by the same people. Google, who not necessarily share the same interests as, we do. They may have different views on things, and they curate information. And, somebody I know was telling me this morning that they were looking up, this deal with Argentina, this $40 billion, bailout. And it's not a bailout, by the way. It's a currency swap and a syndicate of banks loaning money to Argentina. So it's not like we're handing them money. A currency swap, you have to get out of it the way you get in it. Right. Exactly. So, and the bailout, the other 20 billion is coming from syndicates and banks that are actually taking risk and making that decision themselves. And then there's this whole like picture of like, natural resources and all that stuff.
It's an investment decision,
play.
right? I mean,
Yes,
they're making a decision to invest and risk money in Argentina.
Correct. But my friend looked it up, asked Perplexity, and Perplexity like scraped, New Republic and all the like leading lefty nonsense things, and it said it's a bailout. And so you got to be careful with AI, like where they're getting their information and how. And eventually Perplexity realized that it was scraping bad resources and came to the right conclusion. But it's really important with all this stuff that, and I think that's what Elon Musk is doing. I think, I don't know if he's good or bad. I think he's probably good, but I think that it just keeps everyone honest that he's investing so much money in XAI and Grok. I think it's a smart decision.
That's why I still think you have to have a human like us, a human media entity that's out there calling bullshit on some of this stuff when you have bad analysis like that.
Correct.
Interesting. So do you think precious metals keep moving?
Well, the interesting thing about gold, and this is since 1971, gold has had an annualized return of 9%. If you think about it, there's no CEO, there's no debt, there's no regulatory stuff. It's just a piece of metal. And I was reading an article a guy wrote, and he was saying that like the same amount of gold roughly that it takes to pay a U.S. soldier today was the same that it took to pay a Roman soldier back in the day. Like
the barbarous relic.
Right. It hasn't really changed in terms of what it purchases. It's just that fiat's gone the other way and weakened 9% a year. But I think, there's some talk about highly like liquid assets that highly qualified liquid assets that banks have on their balance sheet. And gold is currently not considered one of those, but it meets almost all the requirements of that. I sort of wonder if the years that gold has been, flat in performance, if we're just catching up to that now because maybe the central governments of these countries are not sitting on it anymore. Maybe it's because there's an exchange in Shanghai and an exchange in like Riyadh. And, maybe that's not allowing the Western world, like the US and the UK and Europe or whatever that is, to sit on the price of it. And it's kind of broken through that. And now it's out of the control of the central planning guys.
So how does that go forward? You're exactly right. So you have a situation in the West, in the US and Europe, where you have this, we're being controlled by these nefarious, evil, volcano living people that want to destroy us with this matrix that doesn't work anymore, that just encourages more war. And you have the other side, which sees the golden age. How does that play out? I mean, in the West,
I think we're in the throes of the conflict right now as we're speaking. I think that's one of the, difficulties that Trump's had being an outsider is that they can't necessarily control what he does. And I think, that's why you're seeing populism come out everywhere. It's people are tired of Big Brother. They're tired of governments telling them what to do. They're tired of governments planning their lives. They're tired of governments ruining their businesses and over-regulating them and forcing them to use EVs and get rid of fossil fuel, and tired of moving the jobs out of the countries to China under the guise of, oh, this is climate change. And I think there's a huge pushback. So I think we're in the throes of that right now. And I think that's, like I was saying earlier, that explains to me, because like normally if metals are like this, it's the market's, in the crapper, right? Like normally the stock market is in real trouble and there's real crisis. You're seeing the stock market at near all-time highs, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that like it's really bad for the US. It just means that sort of the dollar is the weakest of all these things, and everybody would gravitate towards either stocks or metals or, you know, something that's, or even in some cases like, you know, Bitcoin or some of these cryptos. It's just like, we don't want to own dollars anymore. We don't want to sit there and support a government that spends recklessly and spends, you know, $8 trillion on wars that we can't win.
Yeah, no kidding. So you mentioned porn. I found it fascinating that OpenAI is going to become a porn engine, because you mentioned the people that control all of what we see online.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before, that porn is a weapon against
it is a weapon. It is a weapon.
And it's
a weapon against society completely.
And now you're having OpenAI say we're going to become an AI porn engine. If there was ever
you got to look at who runs it, right?
Exactly. Well, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, he's a complete degenerate. I mean,
if there was ever a tell on what OpenAI is, this is it.
Yeah. I mean, that guy, I'm not sure I buy into anything he's selling. I'm not sure that he has the interest of humanity at hand, or his idea of what humanity is might be very different. And it's not like his personal lifestyle. I've got like a major issue with the fact of that. It's just that some of these guys are, you know, anti-human.
Well, they have no children. They have no
right. They have a completely different perspective on the world and what matters. And I think it's a, you know, like I'm a sort of a believer in free speech and all this stuff, but I think it's just a bad idea to encourage porn and to get people in this, like, you know, metaverse and yet another way, because they're just numb to what's going on around them. And, you know, if all you care about is that, and you get locked in that world, the government gets more power to control you and to make you do things, and you get exploited.
That's why you got to get outside, like you're saying.
Yeah.
So I think the golden age is about this. I put this up this morning. People don't realize the economic power of a northern alliance across the Bering Strait, economically, strategically, you know, religious. I mean, there's so many things. I think this is why the Ukraine war is continuing. They don't want this to happen. In my view.
I think I completely would agree. I think it's all part of the same thing. And I am personally, with regards to Russia, I think that Russia clearly has the most resources of any country. It is the richest resource country in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a major battle going on of who controls that.
Yes.
And they do not want somebody like Vladimir Putin, whose interest is effectively, whether or not you can make arguments that, you know, he's a dictator, whatever, but I honestly think the guy cares. His interest is protecting the Russian people and making sure that they get to realize the value of these natural resources, whether it's by, you know, education or prosperity, whatever. And I think there's a whole side of people, like when the oligarchs ran the country, that don't give a crap about the Russian people and want to exploit all that wealth. And I think that's really what's going on. And I think with Ukraine, that's really kind of what's going on there too, because, you know, the area in Donbass has most of the mineral wealth of Ukraine. And I think Europe felt like this was going to be like this, like kind of colonial thing. They just go in and they bring in, you know, Ukraine into NATO or into Western Europe, and then they get to exploit the mineral resources that it has. And it's like, you know, what France was doing in Africa with uranium. You know, they were getting it like at super cheap rates for their nuclear power plants. And you know, like, so I think this is nothing more than sort of modern colonialism. And I think that people don't want Putin to succeed. And they've been after him for a long time, because he basically told the oligarchs, look, you will play ball the way I want you to, or you will lose what you have. And he let him keep it, which is interesting.
It made him bring it back to Russia, most of it.
Right. And I think that there's, I think a lot of the animosity towards Putin is the fact that he's not going to let him come in and exploit his country. And I think this idea of having a corridor between us, or, you know, like a connection in the Bering Strait, I think is brilliant. And I think, but, you know, there's people that really don't want that to happen, because it's almost like a recognition of what he's doing there, and a recognition that the Russian people are going to share in that prosperity. And that's it. I think that's the picture that's been going on for a very long time.
Well, I mean, this is what I want our audience to know. You could have an economic alliance. You could have people that are able to live the way they want to without importation of millions of third world migrants that destroy your security, your safety, your economy, your culture. It would be a majority Christian alliance. You know, Russia's 30% Muslim. That's going to happen. It's same in the US, but it would be just unbridled prosperity, in my view. I mean, what do you think?
I 100% agree with you. And I think the reason they're bringing in people is to replace working class votes that they're losing. I mean, I think that's why they've got this massive influx of immigrants, because, you know, like you take the US, for example, like, you know, Minneapolis, they brought people in who are going to use the benefit system and need it, and to replace the you know, blue collar vote that they were losing because they were packing up all the factories and moving them to China.
Right.
I mean, it's that simple, you know, so there is a replacement thing going on. And I think that we don't need to do that. And I think that, you know, part of it is allowing our citizens to participate in prosperity. And that's what populism is all about.
Yes, exactly. What do you think the latest is in the whole debt issue and the attempts to, you know, tie the debt to the stable coin issue?
I mean, I think that's still generally the plan. I haven't heard anything recently on that. I do think that, you know, what's happening now is that I think, you know, Trump's making progress in terms of sort of reorging the Fed. You know, we still got this Lisa Cook thing outstanding that needs to be sort of dealt with, which is frankly very embarrassing for everybody that she's still there. And I think that, you know, Powell's time is up next year. So I think, you know, with regards to that, I think the Fed's going to start cutting rates. I think Trump's going to get more, you know, balanced people in the Fed. I know that someone was making the comment in the Fed yesterday. I think it was, wasn't Bowman, but it was maybe Mirren, that like it was great that they were dropping the climate initiatives out of the Fed. But I think that, you know, I think bonds are reacting well to this stuff, you know, aside from the whole stablecoin thing. I think, you know, yesterday we broke 4% in 10 years, which was good. So I think that the Fed's going to cut, you know, another couple of times this year, and possibly, you know, 2 or 3 times next year. And I think you will see treasuries rally to like 10 years rallied around 3.5%.
Wow.
And so I think, yeah. And I think that is that'll help mortgages. That will help people who want to move from some of these blue states with high taxes. That'll allow them to migrate to the red states. And, you know, it's all part of that's when, and you got deregulation. So this is the golden age, I think, you know, coming out now. And it just scares me, like what they're going to try to throw, the wrench they're going to try and throw in that machine, what it is, whether it's another virus or, you know,
saw Fauci talking about that.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, you hear rumblings of stuff like mosquito-borne stuff in China, you know, and so, you know, it's quite scary, but it's also quite exciting that we could actually have this golden age. And I think that all the right, if we could just end these wars, and focus on the people in this country, and focus on having trade with people. And, you know, I'm a huge fan of this Bering Strait thing. I think that would just be awesome.
And we have to continue putting people in jail and holding them accountable for what they did, so that it doesn't happen again. I mean, that train needs to keep going big time. Yep.
Well, and you know, people are complaining that these people aren't in jail, but I'm like, you know, sadly, but rightfully, they have to go through the court system, right? So then it's like you're having to deal with some wacko judges, but Trump can't just put people in prison, and we wouldn't want that anyways, you know?
Yeah, I agree. Last question. What to take advantage of this, if somebody's listening, where would you start looking? What sectors? I mean, you don't have to name individual stocks, but what's attractive?
Well,
to
I
you?
think the obvious stuff is like IWM, which is the Russell 2000. It's like the small caps. I think that's a good place to start looking. It looks like that has broken out. I think with rates coming down, if you believe this picture continues, housing stocks are on their knees. I think they will start to improve. Some of the home builders, some of the like Home Depot, Lowe's of the world, I think will do well. I'm still very bullish on the whole, AI GPU space. I think that, somebody was telling me yesterday that, A100 chips from NVIDIA, which are the ones that we were selling a while back that NVIDIA was selling, are going for 20 cents on the dollar.
Wow.
Still.
Wow.
And that's because there's a real shortage of chips, and there's a huge build out of data centers. And so I think that sector should be really strong. And that's one you probably want to buy on weakness. But I think overall, I think we're going to get a greater participation of all the sectors in the market if we do enter this kind of golden age, because a lot of it hasn't really moved that much. Like, just until recently, Russell 2000, for example, was at the same level as it was in 21.
Yeah.
It had gone like 4 years without really doing very much.
A very nice baseline there. I said last question, but I lied. What about this China-U.S. chip war in rare earth? Where do you see this going?
I was very surprised that China basically instructed the rest of the world that they wanted to cut off the supply. It's not a very smart thing to do. I don't know. I think China, and I'm reading more and more about this, but I think China behind the scenes has a lot of debt. They've got some real problems. I think these tariffs are really hurting them. They're never going to tell you. They don't care if they make their people suffer. They're trying to build this like kind of Potemkin village that, we're infrastructure, we're the best in the world and all this stuff. But behind it, there's a lot of debt. So I was surprised that they're trying to go, and I don't really know what China's arguing for. I know what we're arguing for. It's fentanyl, it's theft of IP, it's predator dumping in markets. It's valid stuff that we want to get straight in terms of trade policy with them. I don't know what they're exactly wanting, other than the fact that, they just don't like us and they just try to undermine us at every attempt they can. And I personally, I haven't even gotten over the COVID stuff with China. I think that was completely orchestrated intentionally by China. And I think post-COVID, when China opened up 15 months after we did, I think they did it to get inflation going.
Well, I played in the cold open Nicholas Burns, who's a China mouthpiece, Bush mouthpiece for the whole, pro-China alignment that we went through and is suffering through now. He's all about China's much tougher than we think. I think I tend to think about you're more correct, that they're weak, and they're like that they're in game, right? They have to cut off the metals, because if they don't do anything, we're going to continue to roll. And so they're trying to throw whatever they can at us.
Well, their strategy, and like, it amazes me how naive people are, but their strategy is to slow everyone else down so they can catch up.
Yeah.
They did it like this whole EV thing, and climate change has been something that has been orchestrated so that they could slow down the differential between like the fossil fuel industries in the country, and Europe took it hook, line, and sinker. I mean, it's unbelievable. They just destroyed their industrial base. Yeah, correct.
They didn't do it, unintentionally. It was done.
But I think China's been doing that for years, and I think that they're alarmed by the progress that we're making with AI and the technology we have, and they're behind. And instead of addressing some of these real problems like IP theft and playing bad, in the sandbox, is what they've always done with us. After we gave them, World Trade Organization status and all this stuff, I think it's pathetic, but I think that's what they're doing. I think they're trying to just slow us down so that they can get faster and faster and build up time to get up. And that's a strategy. And I'm glad that we have an administration that's tackling that.
Well, that makes this so much more brilliant because it pulls Russia away from China. I mean,
yes.
I think China is so scared of that happening, and that's why they're behind a lot of this. The Ukraine war. I mean, they're funding all of this stuff. So anyway,
yeah, I think they have an interesting relationship with Russia that is very up and down as it is with most countries. And I think that it's in our interest long term. Russia's definitely not our enemy.
Yeah,
not our enemy. I think China has done plenty of stuff to us that go beyond just normal national security, that go into like harming us and intentionally. Yes, correct. And I mean, their opinion, by the way, on a lot of this stuff is, well, you're welcome from the opium wars, right? I mean, but that's not me. Those are people that lived long ago, right? So I'm
like
sorry, I'm not going to pay for those sins.
Yeah,
exactly. Correct, 100%.
Right. Tom, thank you very much, man. Really appreciate it. All your insights,
you got
fantastic. We'll have you back. Take care.
All right, thanks.
Watching my friends gain more and more weight, and then eventually, I got to tell you, this is a little dark, but bad diet literally killed my whole crew.
Wow.
Diabetes, a stroke, I mean, all kinds of stuff. It's like, you had a stroke? You're not even 50 years old. You guys got to quit eating this stuff. Your body knows what's what. You're not conscious of this. But that's why people will go to the refrigerator and they'll grab this and that and the other and put together this outrageously elaborate combination of foods. Your body's trying to reach balance. Unbeknownst to us, our bodies are always trying to reach homeostasis. You can't eat all of this stuff and expect to live a long time. And one thing led to another, and I went, forget this. We're going to make our own product. So we partnered with one of the world's top 3 biochemists where nutrition-specific study is concerned. I said, all I want is the best nutritional and immune support product in the world. So we mixed it in yogurt. It's a powder. I got a bag of it here. I keep one on the console all the time, just so I can show people.
Yeah.
And it's a powder. Now, this is not candy. This is hardcore nutrition. And sugar is an enemy. And most people do not know that the reason these bellies are showing up on people all over the place, your body makes fat to store the toxins it can't get rid of. So it just puts them over here. But I can tell you this, you take this for 30 days and then lay off of it for 2 or 3 days, and you'll go, good grief, give me some more. Skin, nails, hair growing back, cut yourself and it heals in half the time.
I'm David Cross, and you may know me from my election integrity work, but I also own U.S. Asset Management, an investment advisory practice. I've been an advisor for nearly 30 years, and one of the questions I get asked most frequently is, do I have enough money relative to other people my age? And while that's an interesting question, it's also the wrong question. The right question is do you have enough money to sustain your lifestyle for the rest of your life? This is a question you should know the answer to. This is what we do. Check us out at us-am.com and look for our big proud American Eagle logo.
We're foot, slogging over Africa. Foot, slogging over Africa. Boot, moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. 7, 6, 11.
Welcome back to the SCIF. I love having Tom Teague on. He's just got fantastic global insight from a financial perspective. Awesome. I want to give a shout out to the wellness company, twc.health/CDM, promo code CDM, 10% off. We are selling a lot of this stuff right now. The medical kits, people are worried about the viruses coming. They're buying these emergency medical kits. Go to twc.health/CDM, play around with the website, look at all the different kits they have. so that if something hits, you don't have to go to the CVS pharmacy. You don't have to go to the doctor. You can get online with the doctor if you're sick in the house, and he'll tell you, okay, go to your kit and pull this drug and do that. And so that is the beauty of those kits. twc.health/CDM. They also have the ivermectin products, the skin cream, the arthritis cream is flying off the shelves. The arthritis ivermectin stuff, because it's been shown to have an effect to stop your body from, going against itself kind of in an autoimmune way. I don't know all the research, but I do know that there is some evidence that works. Also, the nattokinase in the spike support, where you can help somebody who's been vaccinated and their body may be producing a lot of this spike protein, and it helps get rid of that in their blood, because that spike can do a lot of things. There's some evidence on turbo cancers and other things. So go to twc.health/CDM, promo code CDM for 10% off, and check it out. They're a great sponsor of ours. And I'm just telling you, people are buying this stuff right now, just to let you know what other people are doing. Couple stories. We have Ira Berchatsky at the top of the hour. We're going to talk precious metals, but I want to bring this up. Miami grand jury indicts Smartmatic. This is what's going on in Venezuela. You've had Trump blowing up, I think, 6 fast boats coming out of Venezuela. He says has drugs, narcotics on them, fentanyl. That may be the case, but everybody knows that Venezuela is not the center of the drug trade. It's Colombia, Mexico. And so this is not about drugs. We've talked about this before. It's about the elections. And last night, Smartmatic was indicted in Miami. So if you go to the Miami Independent, we have this story up on the headline, miamiindependent.com. Great paper, by the way, really impactful, read everywhere. And so I would highly encourage you to take a look at that if you're in the area in Miami, miamiindependent.com. But we also do a lot of other Florida news down there. But if it's national, it flows up to cdm.press. But if you're in the region, you can check it out on miamiindependent.com. But this story is huge, because this is not about just drugs. It's about the elections, the gang warfare, Tren de Aragua, the human trafficking, the movement of drugs, people, everything up through Panama into the North America. So it's huge, and we're going to continue to see this. I think Trump my gut tells me Trump's decided to take out this regime one way or the other, and so he's trying to figure out how that's going to go down. And it's a reestablishment of the Monroe Doctrine in our hemisphere, which we've had Ed Vidal from the Miami Independent on many times talking about Marco Rubio. His purpose in life under the Trump regime is to reestablish the Monroe Doctrine, and the CCP and Russia and Iran have been helping Venezuela. It's not to mention the oil. It's just, I think, the largest oil reserves in the world. So it's a prize, my friends, and Trump likes prizes. And if he can get hold of that oil for American economy and remove the Chinese threat and remove the threat to us via our election machines, there's going to be a lot more coming out on this. So please keep an eye on it and go to the miamiindependent.com and check it out. Another story on Colorado Free Press, Tina Peters, judge hearing yesterday, flew out mentioning the Venezuelan whistleblower who testified in her trial that the machines by Smartmatic there was a deposition that he said the machines were developed in Venezuela and used to steal elections in the U.S. And there's vulnerabilities in those machines. The judge threw out the whistleblower testimony, of course, but did allow some amicus brief into the trial. So you can read all about that at Colorado Free Press. We had Ash Epp on, who runs that paper, yesterday. Another fantastic publication that has so much potential and will be growing as we try to get back Colorado for the American people. So check out coloradofreepress.com. Connecticut Sentinel, another really impactful paper that CDM has put together. Has an article on the CDC Advisory Committee is going to examine the safety of child vaccine ingredients. This is important because RFK has essentially removed all the pharma shills. I think there were 7 of them on this panel that he's removed. And so now they're going to actually allow this panel to look at the childhood vaccine schedule and what's in these vaccines. And I think you're going to see some real information come out on that. I mean, this is all disclosure, right? It's happening slowly, but if you notice the snowball is rolling down the hill, it's getting faster and faster. So that's an important story as well. Last one before we go into our next guest. Insurrection, anyone? This is on the Connecticut Sentinel, which has been hugely impactful in Connecticut and really nationally. I mean, this paper is on fire. It's the paper of record in Connecticut now, and it's continuing to grow. And so you can check it out, Connecticut Sentinel, spelled with a C, the old revolutionary way. Check that out. But the great article by James Kunstler, who's a fantastic writer, very sarcastic. I enjoy reading him, though. And this one is about the insurrection we're facing globally, or nationally, I should say. So we'll be right back. We've got Ira Berchatsky is coming on shortly, and we'll talk precious metals because I know you all want to hear about that. So here we go.
Well, in the case of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, these are two medications that have been FDA approved for use in humans for decades. They are very, very inexpensive. Interestingly, available over the counter in almost every other country other than the US and Canada. You can just walk into a pharmacy and buy them like we buy Tylenol in much of the world because they're that safe. And we've known for decades that ivermectin has very strong antiviral properties. It has anti-inflammatory properties, and both ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine are what we call zinc ionophores. They help to move zinc from the bloodstream into the cell, which is where it needs to be in order to fight off a virus. So lots of application for these, and we have every reason to believe that those drugs also will likely have some efficacy against H5N1 or a number of other respiratory viruses that we may meet down the road.
If you haven't noticed, gold has reached a new high, all-time highs actually, and keeps going up every day. Why is that? It's because precious metals are a long-time historical store of value. And if you own a portfolio and you have assets in the fiat currencies, i.e. stocks, bonds, cash, or whatever, you're vulnerable to hyperinflation, which is coming as our debt explodes another trillion every 90 days. It's really scary. So how do you protect yourself? Go to Advisor Metals. If you look on any of our cdm.press sites, about halfway down, there's an ad for Advisor Metals. Click on it, fill out the form for your contact info, and Ira Berchatsky will contact you and talk to you. It's an easy conversation. There's no sales pitch. He's completely verified by us. He has a regulatory background we've checked into. We've checked with his bankers. We've checked with his IRA custodians for metals, and we can highly recommend Advisor Metals and Ira. So go to Advisor Metals. If you call them directly, tell them we sent you at CDM, and he'll definitely take care of you. But protect your portfolio because you really need to. It's coming. Thank you. Welcome back to the SCIF. I want to say, give a shout out to Advisor Metals, and we're going to have Ira Berchatsky here on shortly. If you go to cdmmetals.com for our audio audience, you can fill out the form there, and he will contact you. And we've had great response from customers who've dealt with Ira and his team. They have, they're patriots. That's what you need to know. They're on your side, and they're not hard salesmen. I remember, getting calls in the past when I was younger. From some boiler room people, who wears the pants in the family, buy 10,000 in silver options. I totally remember those days. So Ira's not like that, and we've had really good response. So I'm going to bring him on now. My friend, how you doing, Ira? Good. Thanks for joining me.
Sure, glad to. Good day, Todd.
Yeah. So what is going on in the precious metals markets, my friend? They're exploding. Silver was above 50. I don't know where it is now. Gold is pushing 4,300. What's up? Everybody should have listened to you about a year ago, Ira,
or even a month ago.
Yeah.
Well, you and I were both old school traders, and there's the fundamentals which I look at, which I'll get to in a moment. But I'm a technician. I look at the charts, and the 50 and 200 day moving averages, which is what the big players look at, they've been on an upswing, for gold and silver for a really long time. And in my blogs that I put out there, you can find it on my website. And for people that have signed up to receive them by emails, I've been talking about that for a while. And the markets are interrelated. They're intercorrelated, if you will. So you have the dollar and interest rates and the metals and the stock market. And one of the old time indicators is the Dow theory, which is that as the Dow Jones goes up, the transports have to go up as well to then the bull market's going to continue. Right. Well, the Dow Jones transports peaked a year ago, October of 24, and they're down over 12% since then, even though the Dow is making new highs. So plus the 200-day moving average of the Dow Jones has flattened. It's been flat for several weeks, a couple of months already. So kind of warning signs there. And the insiders, the people that know, they see that. And so that's one of the reasons why they've gone into the metals. On silver, there's the short squeeze, and that's all coming from the producers, the institutions, not so much on the retail side.
So you think it's a manufacturing issue?
Yeah,
because silver is an industrial metal. So tell people what's going on with those short squeezes. Explain to them why there were plane loads of silver bars going to London.
Well, they're coming here. There's
really?
The arbitrage.
Okay.
No, actually, there was a shortage in London, so I know they were probably going back and forth. I'm not too specific on which way they're going, but I know there were plane loads out there over the Atlantic, trying to equalize things.
Yeah.
On our side, there's the arbitrage to get the metals here, and on the other side, in London, the LBMA, the London Metals Organization, they're looking for metals as well, and just what we're seeing is that the cars need silver, and as more things are being onshored, whether it's cars, whether it's solar panels, whether it's phones, they all need silver. And as we're seeing that here coming more onshore, that's going to increase the demand for silver here, and especially the silver that we mine here. And that's created a bit of a squeeze because you're getting the manufacturers. But actually today you've had the metals are down a little bit today, a couple of percent. But I always say nothing goes up in a straight line, nothing goes down in a straight line.
Sure.
And what you need to see is that it's a buying opportunity. Just because the trends are on the upside, and the dollar is up a little bit today, that weighs on the metals as well.
So do you think this Chinese trade war, rare earth confrontation may have something to do with people going into metals also?
A little bit, sure. I don't know too much about the manufacturing, but can silver, replace some of the rare earths? And I know the rare earths are kind of very individual. So that is a possibility as well. But even this morning, Trump says, "Well, maybe I won't do 100% tariffs on China." And he's a deal maker, and what he's saying out in public, I'm sure is a lot different than what's going on privately. But,
I think you're exactly right. So you got Joe Bag of Donuts. He's worked his whole life, in a factory or at a bank. He's got $500,000 in his IRA. He rolled his 401k to his IRA. He's retired. He's thinking, what do I do? Is it too late to get into metals, Ira?
I always think is their FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. And I'm not seeing that. What I'm seeing is people think, oh, I don't want to buy at the high. I don't want to buy at the high. But the high keeps going higher.
Exactly.
And metals are
you could have said that at 35 on silver, right?
Well, John LaForce, who's the real asset analyst over at Wells Fargo Bank, he has been a commodity bull, especially a silver bull, since silver was like $18, and it's tripled since then. And I've written about him in the past. But getting to the point you just made, which was what? Can you get back?
Oh, what do people do? I mean, they never touched metals. They have $500,000 in their IRA. It's all in mutual funds. You know, they're hearing this stuff about metals. Why should they use metals, and how would they do it? Put it that way.
It's definitely a hedge. It's proven itself over time and time again. I mean, look at March of 2020. Dow Jones, the S&P dropped 40% or something. Gold dropped 12%, and it rebounded fairly quickly. So it's preserving capital, and it's something that's been done, you know, as I said, for decades, centuries. And Ray Dalio, who's one of the big hedge fund managers, I think he runs Bridgewater, which is the largest hedge fund. He's saying 15% of your assets, your portfolio should be in gold. And it's a very individual thing. Some people, it might be 5%. Some people might be 50%. I have a story of like 5-6 years ago. There was a gentleman that worked, I won't get too specific on it, but he worked for the federal government, and he had like $500,000 in his TSP, his retirement account. And he said, I want to put it all into gold. Well, yeah, you sure about that? Yeah, I want to put it all into gold. And that was like at $1,800. So he's doing very well. So it's all a very individual thing, but definitely have some gold, some metals in there as a hedge. Absolutely.
So in you know, you learn on Wall Street, the first thing you do if you want to make money is not to lose money, right? So I mean, so that's what you're talking about. You're talking about somebody who's maybe 65, 70, has assets. You don't want to lose them, right? If they're all in mutual funds and we have a financial shock, you don't want to lose it. So this is a way to preserve the value in something that's preserved value for 5,000 years, right?
Absolutely. Even Warren Buffett says, you know, every now and then the stock market's going to drop 40, 50%.
Yeah. And it's been a while since it's done that.
Yeah. You know, it's 2020, and then you had a little drop in 22, 23. You know, are we on the precipice of that happening again? And possibly. So definitely, you know, use as a hedge, protect yourself with some metals. Absolutely.
So if you have it in an IRA, you can still preserve that tax-free wrapper with precious metals, right? You can transfer some to you. And how does that work?
Right. It's another asset. And so instead of having a mutual fund, which is pretty much on a server, you actually have physical precious metals. And the difference is that with the metals, it has to be stored at an IRS-approved third-party depository. And I work with several self-directed IRA custodians, and they work with some depositories. But it's a transfer. It's a tax-free, penalty-free transfer. So you're transferring from one asset into another asset. That's all it is.
And if somebody has, you know, they've made money, they have assets in the bank, and they're thinking, well, you know, I've got all this fiat cash. I don't know what's going on with rates. You know, I'm worried. They can put it into gold as well, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
How would that work?
With you mean outside?
Let's say somebody has $100,000 they want to put in gold. How would they do that with you?
Got it. That's what we call the cash purchase. That we accept for compliance purposes only wired funds. So they wire in the funds, and then we lock in a price. I discuss their goals and aspirations. You know, why they're buying the metals. Because for me, it's all about the customer. It's not what I want. It's not to me. I don't care what product you get. You have to get what fits what your goals and aspirations are. So they make the purchase, and then the metals are shipped directly to them. I pay the shipping and insurance, and either goes to their home or office, and they store it, you know, however they would like to. Very easy, very simple. It's a 2-3 day process. Very easy.
Fantastic. Really appreciate you coming on, Ira. Anything else you want to get out?
No, you've covered everything. I've covered most of it, and away we go.
Excellent. So put some assets in the metals. You'll be happy. Take care, my friend. Ciao.
All righty. Bye. Thanks, Todd.
Celebrate our newest launch, Rev 7. I'm bringing you an amazing introductory offer, plus an exclusive overstock sale that you're not going to want to miss. Rev 7 is our premium energy drink that tastes great and gives you energy all day with no jitters and no crashes. That's because there's no sugar and no caffeine. I'm so sure you're going to love Rev 7 that for a limited time you can try our 3-pack absolutely free. Or check out our Percale bed sheets. I can't believe I'm even going to say this. Every color, every style, every size, only $29.88. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% on our Rev 7 12-packs or try our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. And our Percale bed sheets, all sizes only $29.88, even the queens and kings. Inventory is extremely limited, so order now.
Pandemic, we can never be caught unprepared again. And so many Americans, when COVID hit, they had nothing in the house. Stores were shut down and doctors' offices were shut down. And even if doctors prescribed drugs, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, pharmacists wouldn't fill the prescriptions. That was a nightmare.
Now the situation is much worse. We have these horrible supply chain problems. In our emergency medical kit at the Wellness Company, we have 8 prescription drugs that are all potentially life-saving.
Most people who died with COVID, they died in the hospital because they didn't receive early treatment.
Every American family should have one of these.
I can tell you the Wellness Company kit is the answer.
When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah, we'll give him a hearty welcome then, hurrah, hurrah. Oh, the men will cheer, the boys will shout, the ladies, they will all turn out and will all...
Welcome back to the SCIF. Please give Ira a call at Advisor Metals at cdmmetals.com. You can fill out the form there, he will contact you. Also, if you're a nicotine pouch buyer, use our CDM ALP, that's cdmalp.com link now instead of the old ALP link because they changed their system and how we do that. So it's now cdmalp.com where you can get all those nicotine rounds for that someone who loves the life-giving drug nicotine, according to Tucker. So cdmalp.com. One of the issues that has been really in the press is 9/11. Tucker has been doing a fantastic series on 9/11. Episode 4 just came out. We're going to play that now. And I think we all need to realize our government and what we've been, and the lies we've been told is not what is reality. So I'm going to play this now and we'll close out the show after that.
If you wanted conspiracy theories to flourish after the 9/11 attacks, here's what you'd do. You'd suppress video evidence of the attacks themselves. You'd ship the rubble from the attacks overseas immediately without looking at it. You'd call everyone who disputed the official narrative crazy or a criminal. You'd engage in a campaign of very obvious lies about the attacks. You'd do everything you could to prevent an actual investigation into what happened. You'd avoid any public trials. And when you captured and killed the perpetrator, you'd show no photos or video evidence of the raid that killed him, and then you'd dump his body into the middle of the ocean. Then you'd use the attack to justify the invasion of a completely unrelated country on behalf of a foreign power. In other words, you do exactly what the US government did in the wake of 9/11. It's possible that there are people who wanted conspiracy theories to thrive. The more far out, the better. The more time people spend wondering about directed energy weapons, the less time they focus on the obvious, the facts hiding in plain sight. And the main fact that they are ignoring is our government's central role in facilitating those attacks. We established this in episode 1 of this series, and the extreme levels of incompetence that made it possible for bin Laden from Kandahar, Afghanistan, to pull off the most sophisticated terror attacks in history. On the other hand, not all the wildest theories about 9/11 are crazy. Some of them raise legitimate questions about what happened. And this episode will go through those theories one by one and explain using primary source documents, interviews with CIA officials, contemporary news reports, exactly what we know about those theories. The North Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed at 10:28 a.m. on the morning of 9/11. And when it did, burning debris fell and damaged several of the buildings around it, including a building called World Trade Center, building number 7. It was a 47-story steel frame high-rise located about a football field's length away on the other side of Vesey Street. Interestingly, There was a building between the North Tower and Building 7. That building did not collapse. The collapse of Building 7 is completely unaddressed in the 9/11 Commission report. 577 pages, but no explanation as to why Building 7 fell. And that provoked very obvious questions. People have been talking about it for the last 24 years.
And if you watch some of these pieces, you can actually see them turning to dust before they hit the ground.
A steel building doesn't fall into its own footprint because a plane hit another building a couple hundred yards away.
I did not see a plane. They said the plane hit the first building, the second building just exploded.
The circumstances around Building 7's collapse and the near total absence of an explanation for why it collapsed provoked, in the end, a Senate investigation.
Start with Building 7. Again, I don't know that you can find structural engineers that would say that that thing didn't come down in any other way than a controlled demolition.
Building 7 had a pretty amazing list of tenants. They included, ironically, the New York City Office of Emergency Management. That would be the agency responsible for responding to the 9/11 attacks. On the 9th and 10th floors of Building 7 were the New York Field Office of the United States Secret Service. The equipment and records they kept there were destroyed that day when the building collapsed. The building's 25th floor was home to a secret CIA office. Its records were also destroyed. Across the 25th floor was the Department of Defense office. It's unclear exactly what it was doing there. Building 7 was one of just 3 buildings that collapsed that day. The collapse of the other 2, the Twin Towers, got extensive coverage in the 9/11 report, of course. But Building 7 was almost entirely ignored. It's worth remembering that even on the morning of the 9/11 attacks, there were very prominent people already doubting whether a plane could take down a steel frame building.
I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747 or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through the steel? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall. It just seemed to me that to do that kind of destruction is even more than a big plane, because you're talking about taking out steel, the heaviest caliber steel that was used on a building. I mean, these buildings were rock solid.
One reason the 9/11 Commission may have effectively ignored the collapse of Tower 7 is because even now we don't really know much about it. On the morning of September 11th, Lower Manhattan was cut off from the public with military-style checkpoints. World Trade Center Building 7 collapsed that afternoon at 5:20 p.m. Video that has been widely circulated appears to show it falling symmetrically into its own footprint. Several buildings closer to the Twin Towers, meanwhile, remain standing. That's odd. And then the debris was removed immediately and shipped to Asia. That's even stranger.
Where is all the rubble gone? And have you been able to, is there any way you can answer that question?
I'm sorry, Peter, I didn't get the question.
Okay, I apologize. Jackie Judd and several other people keep asking us, when you look at where the towers used to stand, there is surprisingly so little rubble. Where did all the rubble go?
It's a very good question, Peter, and I have asked some people who've been doing some of the rescue and recovery work this morning. If you look behind me, you can see the very remains, the skeletal remains of the World Trade Center. And one volunteer, Robert Gerlinsky, explained to me the reason there's so little rubble is that all of it simply fell down into the ground and was pulverized, evaporated. Now, I should say, though, for the last several hours, there's been a steady stream of dump trucks and other very large vehicles carrying out debris.
According to a New York Times article published 5 months after the attacks, quote, an unknown number of steel columns has been sent off to mills as far away as Asia without ever having been examined or saved. This made it nearly impossible for engineers to answer the monumental questions of exactly why and how the buildings, designed to sustain a jet impact, completely collapsed. To the extent that any analysis of the debris was done at all, it was done by volunteers at a scrapyard in Jersey City, New Jersey. According to the New York Times, the deepest mystery uncovered in the investigation involves extremely thin bits of steel collected from the trade towers and from 7 World Trade Center, a 47-story high-rise that also collapsed for unknown reasons. The steel apparently melted away, but no fire in any of the buildings was believed to be hot enough to melt steel outright. 2 agencies investigated the collapse. One was FEMA, which relied on volunteers, and the other was NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, funded by Congress. FEMA's explanation is that falling debris from the North Tower damaged the outer facade of Building 7 and started a series of fires in the lower floors. According to NIST, the collapse of the towers in the morning had damaged water mains, so the building's sprinkler systems failed. Since the building had been evacuated earlier in the morning and the fire department's resources were stretched to a breaking point by ongoing search and rescue missions, fire chiefs made the decision early on not to fight the fires that were burning in Building 7. According to the NIST report, thermal expansion of steel beams, not the complete melting of steel, caused the connections tying a crucial girder, girder 2001A, to column 79, and that joint failed. The girder walked 6¼ inches off its seat, and that precipitated what is known as a progressive collapse. That means that the collapse started in one area and then spread downward due to gravity through the rest of the building. That's the explanation. There are two questions that come to mind, and both are obvious. First, if there was just one failure point, then why does video evidence show the building coming down symmetrically, all at once, at freefall acceleration, in what more closely resembles what's called a global collapse, where all the supporting columns are severed simultaneously? The second question is, how have other steel frame buildings around the world, similar in design to that in Tower 7, fared during fires? In 1991, for example, the 38-story One Meridian Plaza in Philadelphia had an 8-floor fire that burned for 18 hours, and yet the building didn't collapse. In 1988, the 62-story First Interstate Bank building in Los Angeles had a massive fire that started on the 12th floor. There was no structural failure. In 2017, the 24-story Grenfell Tower in London burned for over 24 hours, and yet the internal steel withstood the fire. So why then did Building 7 collapse after just 7 hours of burning, in a way that no steel frame building anywhere in the world has ever collapsed? With the support of a group called Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, Professor Leroy Hulsey of the University of Alaska at Fairbanks conducted an independent study whose findings were released in 2020. Professor Hulsey found that office fires of the kind in Building 7 on 9/11 could not have produced sufficient thermal expansion to cause the crucial girder to fail. It's impossible, he found. And more significantly, he and his team found that NIST's explanation does not account for what anyone can see on video, which is that the entire building came down all at once, not in a progressive collapse, but in a total collapse. Something else, therefore, must have triggered the downfall. There's only one thing that could have triggered a collapse like the one we saw on television, and that is a controlled demolition. That was his conclusion. Our ability to analyze the collapse is limited by the video that we have. We don't have footage of the south side of the building where the fires were, because the cameras there were likely destroyed or obstructed by the collapse of the Twin Towers. One issue with the controlled demolition hypothesis is that the widely circulated video of the building coming down is selectively edited. In fact, the building did not exactly collapse all at once. It came down in 2 stages. What you're seeing now is the full video of the collapse. It shows the penthouse collapsing first, and then very quickly, the rest of the building going. The unedited video leaves more questions than it answers. It calls into question the official NIST narrative, but it doesn't conclusively show a controlled demolition either. Because of how quickly authorities shipped the rubble overseas, we did not get a thorough investigation into the destruction. But one group of scientists did collect and test 4 samples of dust and debris collected by a Manhattan resident about 10 minutes after the collapse of the Second World Trade Center tower, 2 the next day, and a 4th about a week later. In 2009, they published the results of their study in the Open Chemical Physics Journal. In those samples, the scientists found distinctive red-gray chips full of highly energetic and thermitic material. In other words, they found traces of explosive compounds. To its credit, NIST's report did investigate multiple hypothetical blast scenarios, but found it would be impossible to carry out on any floor in the building without detection. It would have required removing or cutting columns with welding torches and placing wires for demolition. NIST found that window breakage patterns on visible floors was not at all like expected from a blast. NIST did not test residue from the attacks for thermite, but did note that thermite burns slowly relative to explosive materials and would require several minutes in contact with a massive steel section to heat it to a temperature that would result in substantial weakening. Additionally, they estimated that at least 0.13 pounds of thermite would be required to heat each pound of steel section to approximately 700 degrees Celsius, the temperature at which steel weakens substantially. Which means that if Building 7 were demolished using thermite, many thousands of pounds of thermite would need to have been placed inconspicuously ahead of time, remotely ignited and somehow held in direct contact with the surface of hundreds of massive structural components to weaken the building, making it an unlikely substance for achieving a controlled demolition. NIST also says that an explosion big enough to take down the building would have been considerably louder than any noises recorded around the time the building collapsed. Yet, eyewitness accounts say they did hear explosions inside the building.
All this time, I'm hearing all type of explosions. All this time, I'm hearing explosions.
We attempted to interview that witness. His name was Barry Jennings, but he died at the untimely age of 53 just 2 days before NIST released its report on Tower 7. The film director Spike Lee attempted to cover this story in an HBO docuseries entitled NYC Epicenter's 9/11 to 2021 and a half. In an interview with the New York Times, Lee said the amount of heat that it takes to make steel melt, that temperature is not reached. And then the juxtaposition of the way the Building 7 fell to the ground, when you put it next to other building collapses that were demolitions, it's like you're looking at the same thing. For saying this, Lee was excoriated by the press, which usually lionizes him. He suggested that the official 9/11 narrative might be wrong, and for doing so, he was called an anti-Semitic conspiracy theorist by the Times of Israel. In the end, Lee re-edited his docuseries and removed portions that were skeptical of the official story of the collapse of Building 7. Where do you keep your most valuable possessions? Not your necktie or a pair of socks, but things you wouldn't want to replace or maybe couldn't. Heirlooms from your parents, your birth certificate, your firearms, your grandfather's shotgun. Where do you store those? Under the bed? The back of a closet? No, that's unwise and maybe unsafe. Liberty Safe is the place to store them. I would know. I have a Colonial safe from Liberty Safe. It's in my garage. It's the best. I keep everything in there. It's a ProFlex system. Allows you to design the inside of your safe in a way that works for you. It's not a fixed setup. Someone else puts the shelves in and you have to deal with it. You make it the way you want it. Have a stock of rifles? You can make room. Need more shelves for handguns, for documents, for valuables, for gold. You can do whatever you want. You can refigure your safe in minutes. Maximum flexibility, maximum convenience. Liberty Safe is America's #1 safe company, made in the United States. Great people, I know them. Visit libertysafe.com. Use the code Tucker10 at checkout for 10% off Franklin and Colonial safes featuring the ProFlex interior that you customize. You're going to dig it. We definitely, plus they're good looking, I will say. Another unusual aspect of Building 7's collapse is that some media outlets reported it happened before it actually happened. Here's footage of the BBC reporting that Tower 7 was down. Keep in mind, this was filmed live 20 minutes before Building 7 actually collapsed.
Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Salomon Brothers was Building 7's major tenant, and you can see the tower in the background of the shot. Was that just rushed reporting on the day of the attacks? Or did the BBC have advance word that the building was coming down? If the media did have foreknowledge of the events that day, they weren't alone. Buried deep in the 9/11 Commission report on page 499, one easily missed footnote says there was a surge in put options, investments that profit when stock prices fall. These put options were put against United Airlines' parent company, and they were placed on September 6th and then against American Airlines on September 10th. Incredibly, the report goes on to note that 95% of the trade against United Airlines was made by a single US-based institutional investor. So who was that investor? Well, we don't know. The US government is still hiding his name. They refuse to tell us. Why? No one will say. The commission report says an investigation by the FBI found out the trades were, quote, innocuous, whatever that means. Researchers have since discovered that these trades are far from innocuous, with trading volumes showing statistical significance, massive statistical significance. There were other trades too. On September 7th, the number of put options placed against British Airways was 4 times the normal volume. The number of put options against American Airlines on the day before the attack was 285 times the normal volume. In the days before the attacks, put options surged against Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch. Both banks had sizable offices in the World Trade Center.
There were also notable surges in gold and oil call options in advance of the attacks. But who could have known the attacks were coming, apart from al-Qaeda? One highly significant yet often overlooked aspect of the 9/11 attacks is that foreign intel agencies, including those of ostensible allies, likely had detailed prior knowledge of the event.
These 9/11 hijackers had come from Germany. Were the Germans asleep at the switch, or did they just not tell us anything about these people?
John Kiriakou was chief of counterintelligence on the bin Laden unit.
What about the Israelis? What about the Saudis? There is solid evidence that members of the Saudi royal family were working with al-Qaeda terrorists.
The 9/11 Commission, not surprisingly, ignored this subject altogether. Here's what we know. As early as January of 2001, France's Foreign Intelligence Service learned that al-Qaeda was planning a hijacking plot involving a U.S. airline. What did the French tell the United States and when? We don't know. But the French are not alone. Others knew.
Well, there's no doubt that the Israelis and probably the British had better information than the people working against Osama bin Laden in the agency. Much better information.
Michael Scheuer ran the CIA's bin Laden unit in the late 1990s. One reason foreign governments may have had superior information is that the NSA frequently shared signals intelligence details with them, details it withheld from our own CIA. Signals intelligence is a type of espionage that deals with intercepting phone calls and radio communications.
We needed the collection of signals intelligence out of Afghanistan. And since there was no central telephone company or communications companies, it was very limited. You had to be lucky to find the signal. Well, we found a couple of signals, and we shared the information with NSA, and they collected information and wouldn't share it with us in the raw form. NSA reports are generally summaries of what people say over the phone. You don't really know always who's talking to who. The first thing we did when we got the first copies of translated material, we sent them to NSA and said, can you please provide the other half of this to us? And they said, thank you very much, but under the 1947 Act that created NSA, we don't have to share that with anyone, and we're not going to. But somehow the Israelis and the Saudis always were able to find out something was there that they wanted. And so when we refused, they'd call the White House would call the DCI, and the DCI would say, give it to them.
We know very little about NSA's foreknowledge of 9/11 because the 9/11 Commission barely investigated it. Keep in mind, the NSA is the largest American intel agency by far. And yet the Commission never assigned a staff member to research NSA files, in part because some of the 9/11 commissioners and staff simply did not understand what the NSA was and what it did. Even now, the NSA's terrorism archives still have never been thoroughly reviewed by outside investigators. If someone ever did go through those files, they'd likely find a treasure trove of previously undisclosed warnings about the 9/11 attacks. The NSA was the primary agency responsible for monitoring the switchboard through which al-Qaeda operatives communicated with each other.
It's certainly an absurdity for what the American people pay for signals intelligence to be collected, translated, and supplied to the intelligence community, to have the British, the Saudis, the Israelis getting information from our national security agency that we in the agency were not privileged enough to get.
A number of foreign governments may have had foreknowledge of 9/11, but the Israeli government stands out in particular. And here's why. On the morning of 9/11, a group of 5 Israeli nationals purported to have witnessed the initial explosion of the World Trade Center and were seen to be celebrating the event. At the time, the celebrations received quite a bit of mainstream media coverage.
Fox News has learned some U.S. investigators believe that there are Israelis again very much engaged in spying in and on the U.S., who may have known things they didn't tell us before September 11th.
It's striking to see operatives from a supposedly allied country celebrating the mass murder of Americans. But it is true that some in Israel saw the attack as a good thing for them. A September 12, 2001 article in the New York Times quotes now Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responding to the 9/11 attacks. Quote, "It is very good," before adding, well, not very good, but it will generate immediate sympathy. Netanyahu predicted that the attack would strengthen the bond between our two peoples because we've experienced terror over so many decades, but the United States has now experienced a massive hemorrhaging of terror. According to FBI documents, the Israelis caught celebrating the 9/11 attacks had videotaped the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center and may have possessed foreknowledge of the same. When the Israelis were arrested in New Jersey, they were carrying box cutters, multiple passports, thousands of dollars in cash, and photos of themselves smiling with the World Trade Center burning in the background.
The Israelis are always for the Israelis first, last, always. They don't like the United States, except for the most part, our money. And yet, our National Security Agency is producing information for them, but not shareable with its own people. Go figure.
According to FBI records, polygraph tests administered by the FBI suggested that they did not have foreknowledge of the attacks, but did engage in deception and were likely involved in illegal foreign counterintelligence. They were spying in the United States. The leader of the group, a man called Dominic Suter, fled to Israel on or around September 14th, 2001, immediately, and he was later included on an FBI anti-terror watch list distributed to European allies in May of 2002. Most of the Israelis were held in FBI detention for 2.5 months before they were deported for visa violations, a common way to expel foreign intel assets from allied countries.
The Israelis pride themselves on having infiltrated every Arab intelligence service, every terrorist group. Did the Israelis know about 9/11 and not tell us?
One memorandum submitted to the 9/11 Commission presented substantial evidence suggesting that numerous art students from Israel, who were in fact Israeli intel assets, had been strategically located across the United States. It's hard not to notice that they lived near the future 9/11 hijackers.
There were groups of Israelis traveling around the country as artists, sketching things. Happened to be one time around Cape Canaveral, I remember, and other places where there were certainly things to paint and sketch, but also noticeably near military installations or some other kind of installation in the government. So I think that's an open question yet.
The so-called Israeli art students centered their operations in Hollywood, Florida, and northern New Jersey. Those are the exact locations of the hijackers before the attack. According to the memorandum, quote, "It is very difficult to believe, based on the existing evidence and the location of their common central operating bases, that this group was not tracking the future hijackers and their collaborators as well." According to The Forward, a Jewish publication, quote, "The Israeli government acknowledged the operation and apologized for not coordinating it with Washington." Within a week of the attack, Israeli intelligence officials claimed they warned the United States about large-scale terror attacks on highly visible targets in the United States. But the specifics of those warnings have never been made public. There's no evidence they happened.
In fact, in the whole time I worked in counterterrorism from 92 till 2004, I never saw one piece of information from the Israelis that was really worth anything.
As Americans, we need Washington to create a new, truly independent commission, one that does not lie, and that instead investigates what happened on 9/11 and answers the questions we've posed in this episode. Who made the decision to ship the debris from the attacks out of this country immediately, and why? What was the role of the CIA office in Building 7? What signals intelligence did the NSA have in relation to the plot? And how much of it did they share with foreign governments? What did those foreign governments know and fail to tell the United States? The American public deserves answers immediately to those questions. These are all questions the 9/11 Commission itself ignored. Why did the FBI's most wanted poster for Osama bin Laden, updated in November of 2001, omit any mention of the 9/11 attacks? Why did it take the government 5 years to release footage of the Pentagon? And why were there only 2 publicly available videos of the Pentagon crash? The Pentagon was one of the most heavily secured and surveilled buildings on planet Earth. And yet, even now, more than 20 years later, there are only 2 videos. Why did U.S. forces abruptly bury Osama bin Laden at sea and never release any photograph of his body? How hard, by the way, would it be for amateur pilots with only basic aviation training and no experience flying jumbo jets to navigate to lower Manhattan and crash into a building? The majority of hijackers were flagged for additional screening at the airport. How did they get on those watch lists? And why didn't security slow them down? Why wasn't there substantial wreckage of Flight 93 at its supposed crash site in Shankville, Pennsylvania? We were told the crash of that aircraft was so powerful that it vaporized the aircraft's hull, and yet the hijackers' passports were found intact at the site. How does that work? And who was being protected by the Commission's unwillingness to answer these questions? Someone was. None of these questions were even asked by the 9/11 Commission. It's time that someone asked them and that the government answers them. On September 11, 2001, nearly 3,000 people were murdered. In the years that followed, hundreds of thousands more perished as a result of our response to those attacks. The government enacted measures that suspended constitutional protections, the freedoms this country was created to protect. They're gone now. The government employed illegal warfare tactics, including torture and the murder of innocent individuals. Those attacks fundamentally altered the way America operates, the way all of us live here. And yet not everyone suffered in the aftermath of 9/11. Some emerged the winners. We'll reveal who profited from 9/11 in the next installment of our series.
Hope you enjoyed the SCIF today. Have a great weekend. We'll be back Monday with another great show. Thank you for all the engagement. Please support our sponsors, and we'll see you Monday. Thank you.